Balancing is it's a little bit of a ghost that we're all chasing. Um, it may or may not even exist. To be honest, I may or may not even think that it's something that's possible. It's possible if we're there constantly trying to balance those scales, then maybe it's a real thing. Rodrigo, how do you balance a multi-part monster like a giant octopus that a PC would be able to attack the tentacles or its body? If it's big enough, I would probably treat them as individuals. So especially like if it's a giant octopus, it's like I can imagine the tentacles operating like if you slice them off, they might operate independently. So I would it's almost like dividing the health so that the main body of the octopus has a health and each of the tentacles is going to operate up until the point that their HP is whittled down. But obviously the whole thing, like the focus on tentacles, like there is an overall, I guess, hit point value, but you can effectively take out tentacles and make the fight easier for yourself, I think, at the same time. Balancing though is tricky. You know, it's a lot of guesswork and vibes and giving yourself, honestly, like one of the best things you can do for balance is this little trick right here. I use this constantly. So the hit points for what is this? This is for an archer. So the locals in my game, the islanders that are shooting arrows, they're called Vivid, and they have hit points of 30, which is made by averaging 4d8 plus 12. But that provides us a range of actually 16 to 44. So the way that I get that is by taking the low end of the dice roll. 4d8 is 4, right? If I rolled a 1 on all of those d8s, that's 4. So plus 12 is 16. And on the high end of that, plus 12 is 44. So I could just give this thing 30 hit points no matter what, or I could say it can't go down until it gets 16 points of damage. It has to go down when it gets 44 points of damage. And by having that range when I'm running a game, if it's too easy, then I can say, okay, we're going to go on the high end of that. If it's too hard, we're going to go on the low end. And that helps to sort of actively balance it out. See you, T. So I would try maybe those two things, because balancing is it's a little bit of a ghost that we're all chasing. It may or may not even exist. To be honest, I may or may not even think that it's something that's possible. It's possible if we're there constantly trying to balance those scales, then maybe it's a real thing. Usually, some of the PCs always hit their attacks and deal at average, give or take 2/3 of where the problem has been that if I reduce the tentacles HP, the action economy becomes very player sided. But if I increase it, the exact opposite happens. Could you give the tentacles a solid HP, but like let's say you have 5 tentacles, but only like 2 tentacles get to attack per round? Can you balance it out that way? Like even though the creature has however many tentacles that could attack, that way you're making sure that the HP is big enough to make it a threatening villain, but you're reducing, like, so in other words, like maybe the octopus has an attack, and then at initiative 10 and initiative 0, that's when the tentacles attack, and that's it. That way you're not rolling in so many different enemies. Hey, what's up, guitar guy? Welcome to the stream. How do you judge random combat encounters on the fly? Make sure it can be fun without killing PCs. Yeah. That's the challenge. So there are a couple of different ways to do this. There are two, actually, you know what? No, there's one video I'm gonna throw your way, not to send you away right now, but it's 5 minutes and it breaks down the math of how I do it. I'm curious if you take a look at that and see what you think of that idea. And then if you have questions about it, come back and let's chat about it. Because that video is probably going to do a more succinct version of that explanation than I will be able to right now. That can help, JJ. But there's also, I think there are ways to lean in and kind of actively rebalance it as the combat goes. But That is, yeah, you're right. That is a good place to start. How much detail do you put into your campaign settings, NPCs, VG, to keep it loose to adjust on the fly? I prep, for the most part, I prep a session at a time. That doesn't mean that I don't put any work. It just means that like I'm hesitant to do a lot of world building if I don't know that it's going to impact the next session. That tends to be where I spend the bulk of my time, is on whatever the next in-game thing is. World building is a tricky one. It's I feel like I see people get really caught up in world building, and then it feels like, is it even being a dungeon master anymore? Yeah. So the basic model is to take, I usually have like an outline, like even what I'm planning right now. So I'm trying to run approximately a 8 to 10 session campaign set on an island. And I have an outline, right? I even have titles of the sessions. I think this is what they're going to be. But we're here in session 3. And if we go back, like, we can look at just like all the prep work I do for these sessions, right? It's all laid out here, stat blocks, like all the things. Got a chase sequence in this one, and there's like a dungeon that I prepped. And then you start to get out here, and it's like, okay, not as much there. And like, oh, I just jotted down a bullet points, just like a couple of stray ideas for what it could be. The further out we get from the session that I'm in, it's just a vague idea, because we may play this next session and maybe there's a hint of what's to come and they engage in a different way. And then I want to reflect on that and say, well, geez, they really latched onto this idea. Let me make sure that that gets more of a focus in these next sessions. So, it all depends, but I'm very like, I don't really ever have 2 sessions that are ready to go. It's only ever the next session, which can be tricky for world building, because that means sometimes I have to sort of hit it hard, because, for instance, in this campaign, I've got these 3 factions, and the 3 of them, one being the group on the pirate ship. Well, in order to run the pirate ship, I had to really figure out that pirate crew, right? I had to make I didn't have to, but I wanted to, made like a whole manifest and figured out kind of the basic personalities of these characters on this ship, because they were going to meet them. And the same way, like now they're going to start meeting characters on this island, and I kind of have to, if I want that to be deep enough, I have to dig into that. So I always have some sort of world building that I'm doing on the side, but it's always with a mind to what's going to show up in the session. If it's not going to show up in the session, it's not that I don't care, but I guess practically speaking, I don't care, right? My world map, if we jump over to that, my world map is intentionally incomplete. Huge, big, empty spots. I guess it's kind of complete there. It continues down south off of this. I have no idea what's down there. I've created a world map that extends as far as my campaigns go and no further. I like this. Some people, I understand, it would drive them crazy. I like having the freedom of this. And honestly, I've never had any complaints from any of my players that like, oh, but what's the rest of the world look like? It's like, well, here's the region that your campaign takes place in. And it's been just fine. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to it. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that can be tricky. I do a lot of stuff written down too, but certainly managing all of that. I mean, you could certainly go a lot simpler. Boundless binders and journals. Yeah, then it just comes down to like, pick your organizational method, right? Do I keep lists of ideas to incorporate later? Yeah. I tend to plan sort of arc by arc, but I have like, big ideas for the future. But my priority is always on what's it going to take to run. What's next? What's the next thing that I need to be ready for? Otherwise, just because I don't want to spend time prepping stuff that maybe my party never engages with, maybe they never get there, maybe the game ends before I ever get to that, and so I just try to stay focused on whatever's next. And I mean, but also keep in mind, I'm running 3 campaigns right now, so that has a lot to do with it too. I've sort of given myself on purpose not enough time to dig in very far on any of them, because I have to stay focused on what's next. on purpose. That's what I like. I've been running games for 6 going on 7 years now.